Up and running, and Villa Park is loud.
Hi everybody, welcome back to the Villa Park podcast, and it's this week's edition of Talking Tactics. This week it's Kev because Richie's away sunning himself in Mexico, but I'm joined as always by Gareth, our resident football analyst expert, to talk through yet another Villa win. Gareth.
Yeah, brilliant, wasn't it? You know, we can't complain, can we? We're sort of scoring goals with plenty, and yeah, another great win.
It feels like often we obviously said this pre-show that, you know, when we lose, there's obviously more maybe to pick the bones out of. But I guess since you've been working with us, it's been a lot more wins and losses, hasn't it? So it's obviously lots of good stuff to talk about. Yeah,
I'm counting myself as a lucky charm. If that's the way you've put that question, I'm counting myself as a lucky charm, I think. But yeah, I mean, what can we say? You know, it's another one, isn't it? And like I say, we're scoring plenty of goals and exceeding the XG all the time. So, you know, we're creating plenty of chances, and the setup and the shape is just brilliant again this season.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, listen, before we dive into obviously all of the great analysis stuff, everyone, if you could please like the video on your way in, obviously share it to those who are clearly trying to keep pushing the channel forward. We're now at 2,300 and a bit subscribers, so we really want to push towards 3,000. And obviously, if you would be so kind to subscribe, that would be great. Obviously, as you can see, shows like this hopefully are a bit different to some of our rivals out there, but we're really trying to bring some real top quality content to you. So with that in mind, Gareth, let's dive into the first one, mate.
Let's go.
So we've got the passing networks here. So if you want to talk us through this.
Yeah, interesting, because it was more sort of not a disagreement again, but sort of a discussion with someone on Twitter where we saw on a lot of the lineup graphics on some of the apps that it was a 3-4-2-1, which essentially it was, but again, out of position, it was still a 4-4-2 essentially, but a 3-4-2-1, you could probably see that here. So you've got the back three, Carlos, Conser and Pau. And you've got the two wing backs of Cash and Digne. Now, Cash was obviously pushed inside a little bit more. So almost like a bit of a hybrid sort of, we see it with Manchester City. We see it a lot with Arsenal as well, but not quite to that extent for us at Cash. But we can see where we're sort of almost edging towards there. And a lot of passes between sort of Carlos, Pau and Olsen. And that was the sort of the way it was to go. And we preferred to build up through the right-hand side. Cash saw a lot of the ball. And it was interesting shape again. Something a bit different to what we've been seeing.
I think you can see from their kind of obviously the influence that Pau is obviously having on the team already, because he's obviously massively involved, isn't he? And obviously Carlos as well. What do you think of you know, he was seen as being that progressive centre half, wasn't he, when we signed him? So how do you feel that those two did at the weekend?
It almost seems like it sort of took a little bit of the weight off his shoulders by coming back into the side, doesn't it? You know, because you've got Torres sort of who was heavily involved, and we'll see that a little bit more later on, sort of pushed in, sort of a little bit happy to move forward with the ball and progress with the ball. Carlos's job was just as more of a traditional centre back in this game.
Yeah, and obviously you can see here in terms of the positions as well. I mean, were you surprised that Cash was playing that far forward when you saw the lineup?
No, maybe in that shape, particularly. I think, you know, as in that we can see, as we see, it was a back four out of position. So he is more sort of that akin, but this was an average position. Obviously, we take that as such. So, yeah, slightly surprised, but it was effective. And I think he knew what Burnley were going to try and do. But we haven't seen sort of this 3-4-2-1, if you like, shape a great deal. It's more sort of a back four all the time with the two progressing fullbacks or Cash making that back four. But he seems to have found a little bit of a niche here, I think.
He does. Whenever I do my lineups for the preview shows, I always say every week, I don't know what position to put him in, because back in the day, if you were doing a lineup for a football team, you know, to write it down 10 years ago, you'd have a 4-4-2 or maybe a 4-3-3. Now my lineup probably looks a bit more like this graphic, because I know that some of the players are going to be in weird positions. So, but that's just obviously a mark of, I guess, the more modern progressive manager, of which obviously Emery is massively one of those, isn't he?
Yeah, and I also think if you see three centre halves on the team sheet, you are looking at that shape. I think if you are looking at someone like if there's just Pau and Carlos and Concert and Digne, for example, then I think you're looking at that sort of hybrid back sort of three sort of shape. So yeah, I think we're starting to get a little bit of an idea as to how he will play against different sides, and it's a very difficult thing to gauge. But I think if you've got Digne and Cash in the side alongside three orthodox centre backs like that, this is the shape we're going to be looking at moving forward if he chooses to use it.
Yeah, and I think to read into, obviously Watkins is not one of the the biggest ones on that graphic there. I think to read into his influence at all.
No, Watkins is very rarely high in. Anybody who follows the pod will know that his expected threat involvement through passing, especially, is not high. It very rarely is, but obviously his role is the goal scorer in the side. But do we want a little bit more for him? Maybe. I think we've discussed this, me and Rich, a lot in the past, where if you had someone in a number 10 behind him, like Diaby, for instance, or even a different sort of centre forward, a hold-up man, we would see that man with more of an expected threat due to his hold-up play. But Watkins very rarely involved like that.
Well, let's go on to the next one. Might be quite timely talking about striking threats, the expected goals. So this is obviously the expected goals timeline. So Gareth, just talk us through this one.
Yeah, I mean, who expected Matty Cash to get a goal, let alone a brace? And it was really impressive. And obviously, we're looking at different sort of shots in the game and their expected goals value. And yeah, exceeding again by scoring the sort of 3.0 xG was absolutely fantastic in scoring the 4 goals. So what can we do? There's nothing to complain about there.
No, there were a few managers apparently. I think they must have been bot accounts from Fantasy Premier League that apparently triple captained Matty Cash at the weekend. What an absolute result that was!
Some big points coming their way, that's for sure.
Yeah, that Foster goal that we can obviously see on the timeline would have ruined the clean sheet as well. But yeah, I mean, just in terms for those that haven't seen it before. So in terms of obviously the lines on the screen there, the higher the line, the more threat the team was. You can see pretty much, can't you, that there's a massive difference between both sides.
Yeah, sorry, I said, and I excuse myself because I said 4 goals when I meant to say the 3 goals. But yeah, we can see that it's increment. What is interesting is I think me and Rich picked up on it before. Under Steven Gerrard, we rarely saw those sort of shots being taken, that incremental line in the first half. We sort of tended to appear more in the second half, where even then it wasn't that great. But we're seeing us come out. We're dominating the ball. We're creating chances early in the first half. And I think you want to try and get the game won as much as possible. And as an analyst, we look at those sorts of things that, can we do that in the first half? Can we get sort of more in front in that first half rather than having to leave it to the second half?
Well, we've scored in the first 20 minutes now of all the games we've played, even obviously the heavy defeat away at St James's, we've scored early on. And I think last season under Emery, particularly at home, it was a hallmark of us starting fast. So, I mean, do you think teams can because obviously every team, I always think this is an interesting one, every team wants to start the game well. And I appreciate if you're away from home, you might be maybe slightly more cagey at first. But how is it you think Emery's managed to get us to be such quick starters? Because clearly that gives you a massive chance of winning the game, doesn't it, if you go a goal up?
Yeah, when you've got the bottom line is that if you've got a possession-based style, you're obviously going to have more of the ball. Now we saw the West Ham game where that didn't sort of quite work out for Chelsea or whatever, and it was very sort of different. But when you've got a possession-based style of football, you want to try and obviously keep the ball as much as you can, but you want to try and do something with it when you've got it. And Villa have been doing that. I mean, to go 2 goals up, like you say, within that first half was really, really important. But away from home, you're obviously looking, you think the home team are always going to try to score, really. So to be 2-1 up at that time is always very handy, because then if it gets to 60, 65, 70 minutes and you're still 2-1 up, you can then adjust your substitutions and your tactics to suit, because you're ahead in the game.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Well, the next one is the expected goals, the shot map. So, yeah, again, just talk us through this one.
Yeah, plenty of shots, 16 shots, 3 on top, 3 goals, and what's not to like? 0.19 per shot is pretty decent return away from home in the Premier League. 3.0 xG, yeah, just plenty of shots, especially from that right-hand side, which is quite interesting. I can't think who had the most shots for us in the game, but from what you can see, yeah, pretty dominant performance in front of goal. And this is what we were missing last season.
Yeah, yeah. And under Emery, I think this is the thing, isn't it? We don't seem to have too many shots from outside the box. And as you can see, I think on a lot of these graphics anyway, you can see a lot of the shots are inside and clearly more chance of scoring. But There was a bit of debate about Diaby's, but I think it was just outside, wasn't it? As you can make
it was, yeah, it was, yeah, it was just outside. And this is all data from Understat. So obviously, this is just plotted. This is their data. This is plotted by me through their data. So it's accurate. It's Opta data. It's really good stuff. And yeah, not a lot, as you say, not a lot of shots from outside the box. And that's what it's all about. It's about creating those expected goals and just being more clinical. But away from home, especially with Burnley, don't forget, not relegation favourites, some might say, but to get that, to win 3-1 away from home, against a Vincent Kompany side, is still really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of Villa fans were thinking probably in a different season. You go away. Burnley would have been thinking that. I know obviously Villa have been doing really well, and all the graphics out there about points in 2023 for Emery. But if you're a Burnley, you're thinking maybe Man United, Liverpool, Man City, etc. might be defeats, but you might think a game against someone like Villa, who the last away game they played in the Premier League, they got heavily beaten. You might think you've got a chance to get some points there, but they never really looked like winning, did they?
No, and I think the Newcastle game was a bit of a shock to the system for a lot of the players, and especially I think we'd come off a bit of a rough weekend, injury-wise, and it was a bit of a difficult thing to take, and I think it was a bit of an anomaly. I think if we went to Newcastle in another 6 months, I don't think we'd be getting beat 5-1 again.
No, I totally agree. I actually really, really subscribe to that viewpoint. That you might think it sounds a bit heartless, but you've got a job to do. And if you were in the military and you saw one of your mates get injured, you'd have to carry on. But Premier League footballers, particularly with such a tight knit, closely bonded squad, you've seen your Argentinian, little maestro Buendia get injured on the Thursday or the Friday, and then obviously at the weekend Tyrone did his similar injury, and you could just tell they were shell-shocked, weren't they?
Yeah, I think having been involved and been on training grounds in clubs and things like that, people don't always tend to realise how sort of friendly in our group these people go out together. They're not all the same, granted, but it is a tight-knit group, especially when you've been together for as long as what they have, with minus a few additions, of course. But it is a tight-knit thing, and it does affect you. Don't let people ever tell you otherwise, especially Emi Bendu. He's a very likeable character. They love him there. He's a really popular lad, and that really would have hurt them, I think, especially. And of course, Tyrone.
Well, Tyrone's been basically, without obviously having the armband, he's been basically captain on the pitch, and he has along with McGinn. And I think, I know it's a slight sort of deviation from the Burnley game, but his renaissance basically under Emery that's the biggest shame for me, because I think he was up there with one of the best Premier League defenders until that injury happened. Yeah,
there's more to coaching than just tactics.
Yeah, well, I think he's the perfect example, isn't he? So, yeah, man management. So the final one of these graphics here is the expected threat. So again, just talk us through this. There's a good name at the top of the list for Villa fans. We like to see that.
Yeah, John McGinn. Yeah, especially this is obviously something I've tried to bring in for this season, just to try and give people a sort of a general idea of how threatening a player was through his passes in that game. And John McGinn comes out on top with Douglas Luiz. Some interesting names there from Burnley, but yeah, an interesting graphic. And John McGinn with the ball at his feet, kind of unnoticed a little bit against Burnley, I thought. I didn't think it was one of his sort of completely standout games, as it were, but he played really well and he contributed really well, as it shows.
Yeah, his form has been absolutely excellent, isn't it? Particularly when, the third goal, when the way he turns with the ball, the ball's coming at pace and he manages to turn, that was basically pivotal for the third goal. And obviously, he didn't get the assist, but he basically assisted the assister for the first goal. So he was massively involved, wasn't he?
Yeah, he is. And it'll be interesting. We've got sort of doing something at the minute on monitoring John McGinn and some of the other players in their passing. So halfway through the season, or sort of 3 months, 4 months in, we'll have a look at that and see how they compare with each other, I think.
Are you surprised with his form in the last few months that there's not been more links for him to be moving to one of the so-called big clubs?
Yeah, strange he hasn't had any links, but I don't know. He's not everybody's cup of tea, is he, as a midfielder? I can see why people probably wouldn't want him, but this season he's proved why you would want him. And he fits Villa perfectly. I'm not so sure whether he fits a lot of other teams.
Yeah, well, we like to think that with all of our players, it's the same with Martinez, same with Watkins, they love the Villa. Look at Jack, Jack Grealish. Yeah. But it does feel like McGinn, captaincy, I think he's starting to really show that captaincy now in terms of how he plays, his influence on the pitch. We need a few more goals, don't we, really, from him?
Yeah, I think, you think you've hit the nail on the head. He is captain material. When you think of a captain, he is that sort of captain. He shows everything on the pitch, the way he goes at players, you know, the way he sort of his work rate and everything else, and perfect captain for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's some other really great stats and graphics to show up now. So just bear with me while I share my screen. Richie's always a bit of a pro at this in terms of doing this. Try and be as quick as I can be. Here we are. So let's go. So Gareth, if you can see that now. Yep.
Yeah.
So talk us through this one. So this is the aggressive midfield shape.
Yeah, we just wanted to I just wanted to highlight sort of thing. Our Villa now, sort of, even when they're in these sorts of positions, are pushing the majority of the players, even the back four, the full backs. You're only here looking at Torres and Carlos are not in the frame. So in Burnley's final third, you've pretty much got every Villa player, which is really good to see. You've still got Cash on that right-hand side. You've got Digne here on the left-hand side. You've got plenty of options. So, Consa's not in the frame, is he, as well? But You've got that option there, and you've got Kamara just sitting off there. You've got Luiz, who's ready to receive the ball in that the first of the double pivot with Kamara. Players in really good positions, probably push maybe McGinn a little bit further forward and Diaby into those sort of 8 spaces, the half spaces. But apart from that, I wanted to highlight this because I think this is an important thing to look at.
Yeah, do you think the way Burnley set up helped us at all?
Massively. Yeah, they got it wrong. Simple as that. And I think I've seen a lot of other sort of people on Twitter, especially, sort of saying that they did. And this is one of the sort of examples that they did. Now you've blocked the 3 players in the centre. You've essentially put the 3 Burnley players in the centre of that pitch.
Yeah.
But you don't need to do that. You could drop one of them off and at least press our centre backs if you wanted to do that. You're letting Villa have the ball sort of in there comfortably in their own middle third. And it was just a little bit sort of, there was no press from them, and they were happy for us to have it. But yet with Luiz and Kamara's movement, it just doesn't work.
No, and it did feel easier than it should have been for an away game in the Premier League for me.
Massively. Exactly that. And I think, like I say, the Burnley setup, they really did sort of not really sort of improve upon that throughout the game. They stayed pretty much as they were, and just different personnel, but it wasn't the way that to set up against us.
Yeah. Well, the next slide we've got is the midfield shape. So this aggressive midfield shape. Oh, have we done that one?
We've done that one, yeah.
Yeah, where am I going with this? Oh, I know what I've done. Look at my technical notes here.
There you go.
Central blocking. Burnley, there we are. Midfield shape, and then we've got here we are. Perfect. So we've got the 4-4-2 out of possession, high line, and obviously the mid block.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight this because this was a little bit of a change almost to what we have seen as well. Not a great deal, but just a small change. Those midfield 4 out of possession were barely ever than 10, 15 yards apart for the majority of the game. And that's why I've linked them here together. You can just see that sort of the link that they were at. And this is obviously out of possession. And it was narrow because you've got Digne and you've got Konsa who can cover wide areas. Therefore, our midfield 4 can block those central areas. This essentially is what Burnley should have done to us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, really apparent there, isn't it? You can see how close they are together. It really is apparent. Yeah. Do you think that that Cash is? I know we mentioned obviously whether you were surprised whether Cash was going to actually play in that position, but how do you think he did? Obviously, it was he obviously scored his goals, which is obviously clearly positive. But in terms of the actual general duties in that position, how do you think he did?
I think he did well. I mean, people I don't know whether people remember, he played there for Nottingham Forest for quite a while on the right-hand side of midfield before he was converted to a right-back, if you like. I think he did really well. He's got that sort of energy about him. He's got that sort of defensive nous. Going forward, yeah, okay, he's not so great maybe, but to fulfil that role against Burnley away from home, I think he did really well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real asset, isn't it, for Aston Villa, the fact that Cash is, when you've got a fullback sometimes and they're not used to playing forward, and you might try and stick a square peg in a round hole, but for most of his early career, that's the role that he played. I mean, I remember going to that famous 5-5 game at Villa Park against Forest, and he was all action. Cash was in that game, So
yeah, he's got that bit about him, hasn't he? He's got that stamina and that energy that you would like to. He can fulfil both roles going forward and back It's just a shame that maybe he spent a lot of time at fullback and not an attacking one as such. So he's kind of lost that ability to sort of, he's not a crosser of the ball as such, but he got 2 goals. He was in the right space at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next one is the midfield connections and playing into Emery's hands.
Yeah, this is sort of like a precursor to really the other slide of the 4 connections that we showed. It's basically the same thing. You can see what the Burnley defenders trying to play that ball, thinking about sliding that ball, and this is where Kamara and sort of Luiz out of possession were really, really good. You know, Kamara sort of in that double pivot with Luiz. He was the one that tended to sit in this right-hand half space, and he tended to block that run. It wasn't the same on the other side, but we didn't need to because Burnley seemed to be, persistent in going sort of through these areas and down this left-hand side. But the midfield 4 shows again, Konsa can come out, Digne can come out, so the midfield 4 can end up being narrow. And this is what I meant by sort of playing into Emery's hands. Says it all.
Kamara was excellent, wasn't he, at the weekend?
Yeah, really good, especially out of possession, I thought. I mean, people say in possession, but a lot of his work sort of goes unnoticed, a lot of it. But yeah, out of possession, he was really, really good.
Yeah, I think he was. I mean, obviously Cash got the goals and could win man of the match, but I think he's probably up there with McGinn for me in terms of influencing the game. Okay, we've talked about him a couple of times. Let's talk about Mr. Matty Cash.
Yeah, just a brief one really on Matty Cash. We've said everything, I think, but his timing of his runs, this is in the second half, but in the timing of his runs, sort of to and have the ability to actually break that defensive line and be an option. I think this was this his second goal? I can't remember. Don't think it. No, it wasn't, because it was in the first half. So yeah, he just took that ability to break those lines and have the ability to go forward. And I think that was important. He was obviously told to do that, which is really good.
Well, the difference I think with Cash, when Cash plays that role, is maybe unlike Digne, is Cash is more of an athlete, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's not. Digne is technical. You can tell that in terms of the way he brings the ball down sometimes and his delivery. Cash gets obviously derided for his delivery sometimes, and maybe his defensive duties. But when he's bombing forward like this at pace, and he can change direction pretty well. A lot of his goals I can seem to remember him scoring. There was obviously the goal he scored against Leeds away in the 3-1. There was the famous goal against Man City when they turned it around to win the league. But he does do that thing where he kind of cuts inside. He did it in pre-season, didn't he, in America? He seems to change direction quickly, cut inside, and he's pretty good with both feet as well.
Yep, like I said, he's got that stamina to be able to do it, to be able to get up and down and that. And I think it'd be interesting to see how we sort of go forward with the back 4 if Cash is that right back, because he seems to be more suited to almost this role than he does another role. But do you want a more attacking threat in that role that he played on Saturday? Maybe. Yeah. So it's an interesting quandary.
Yeah, there's been links to all sorts of players over the summer, from Torres, Nonto, Abdi. There's been all sorts of players wide, but it remains to be seen in the next 2 days whether we actually get someone in, or whether Cash has done enough to kind of get the role himself, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. That. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see the next few days, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and the last one we got up here for the slides is Cash's second goal and numbers in the box, and this is great to see. I mean, look at that. We're absolutely bombing on, aren't we? There.
Yeah, I got this graphic confused with the previous one. This is what I meant by the Cash's second goal. Yeah, exactly. We've been crying out for it since last season. Numbers in the box. And again, important to see here Kamara's position. Not sort of emptying the box, but just sitting off that little bit to provide that defensive insurance. And this gives the freedom of Luiz to make up the numbers in the box. We saw it at home in the last home game, I think, the last season. Luiz started to sort of come into the box that little bit more, and says it all. You can see it in the graphic. It says it all.
When I looked at that graphic, I was thinking to myself, McGinn was easily in. Digne, if he'd gone to the back post, was easily in. Luiz or Watkins on the edge of the box. So, I mean, I think that cutback could have gone anywhere, and I still think we would have had quite a high expected goal threat from it.
Exactly. This is why I highlighted it, because it was apparent to me on the replay. You can just see the numbers flooding in the box, which is really important.
Fantastic. Gareth, great analysis as always. One thing I wanted to just add to it all, obviously there's been some links today with Clement Longley coming in to maybe bolster the defence. What are your thoughts in terms of his attributes and how he might fit into an Emery system?
Yeah, I think whether he'll come in straight into the side, I doubt it. I think that's almost pretty settled almost without Tyrone in the side now. I think that back 4, give or take Cash or Konsa, maybe is pretty settled. So yeah, he's a good player, Longley. And I did put a tweet out just sort of half hour ago, really, that people sort of shouldn't dismiss him. He will be a very good addition to the squad, especially if there's an injury in that area again, we will find ourselves short again.
Yeah, well, I think this is the thing with Emery, I find, is that if you think about, obviously, his time in Spain, there was players, whether it was, Coquelin was always a good example for me. Someone like a Foyth, who I remember Foyth getting loads of grief when he was at Spurs, but obviously doing a great job, obviously, for him in Spain. And, players like Lo Celso, who was never really seen as being brilliant in the Premier League, but obviously did a really good job. And, Longley is obviously highly rated. Emery knows what he's doing. Monchi knows what he's doing.
Yeah, of course he does. And, he's played over 100 games over Barcelona. You don't do that if you're no mug. He played a lot for Spurs last season as well. So he's obviously highly thought of across. And like you say, I think, in my opinion, it's proactive recruitment. I don't think we would have gone in for another centre-back had Tyrone sort of. But you've got to have covering that. There's going to be a lot of games coming up. Yeah,
absolutely. And do you think we'll get any reinforcements in the attacking areas?
I think they've got to replace Buendia, so I wouldn't be surprised to see someone coming in that area. But apart from that, I don't think so. I think the right back ship has sailed. I think he's happy with Cash. I think he's happy with Conser in that area. So I'm surprised at a centre-back replacement, to be honest. But I think he will have to recruit in an attacking area, I think.
Well, I think defensively, if he keeps Chambers around, obviously that'll help with the the homegrown thing for Europe as well. But he can obviously cover at right back. He can cover even at DM if there's an injury to Kamara. Not ideal, but it's obviously all about squad. But if the rumours are true that obviously Philip Coutinho's off, if you lose Buendia and then Coutinho goes as well, Ramsey's out. Zaniolo doesn't really directly replace any of those. So
exactly that. That's what I'm saying. In that sort of the left-sided attacking position, because I don't think he wants McGinn to be moving around as much as what he is. So
yeah,
I think there'll be sort of hopefully there's something in the pipeline coming in those sort of that sort of attacking midfield area that's be able to play across there somewhere.
Yeah, just finally before we go, what were your thoughts on Nicolo Zaniolo? Of the few opportunities to score, a no-look pass, a little nutmeg.
I had reservations, I've got to be honest, but that was more to do with the fact that I've followed, Roma and everything for quite a long time. And Galatasaray is a bit injury prone and he's had 2 ACLs, and that can become a real problem if he's a permanent transfer. However, it was a loan. That makes me a little bit more sort of at ease. The fact that if there's another injury, okay, it's not ideal, but you can kind of cope with that. And I don't want that to happen, but I was really pleased. I thought his cameo on Saturday was really good. I thought he looked really good, Not a massive fan of no-look passes, do you know what I mean? But I mean, it is what it is, isn't it? But he did well.
Yeah, and a bit of a throwback, isn't it, as well? Like his shirt tucked in. Obviously, he had his pink boots on, which is a bit flared. Then his shirt tucked in like a 1950s player. So he's. Do you think he'll be do you think he can be maybe a bit of a fan's favourite if he can start to get a few goals and assists? Do you think that the fans seem like they've taken to him? Obviously, we've got the Smith Rowe and Saka song from Arsenal going nicely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I was impressed, I must admit, for a first, just to get those minutes under the belt, but he looked really good. And I think that's why he probably didn't go for that other centre forward that Rich and I have talked about on here before. I think he tried to get sort of maybe a bigger attacking midfielder in that could play behind Watkins a little bit. And he's a lot different to Buendia, obviously. So a lot more mobile and able to press. So we'll just have to see how that sort of pans out moving forward.
Absolutely. Well, look, obviously the game's coming thick and fast now. We've got pretty much a dead rubber against Hibs on Thursday night. So I'm sure we'll do a show about that. I don't think it'll be probably one of the longest ones because it's probably not going to be too much to talk about. And hopefully we get to see a few of the squad. Gareth, great to have you as always. I think Richie's away next week, so I think it'll be you and I doing the if obviously if you enjoyed this enough, doing the Liverpool. Hopefully talking about another win against Liverpool. So. Thanks as always for joining us, mate.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for having me, mate. It's been really good. Yes, hopefully we'll have another win against Liverpool. It'd be nice. No Van Dijk, so we should be all right.
We'll keep our fingers crossed. And just finally, everyone, please, if you're not already, be great if you consider giving us, obviously, subscribing to us. Give the page a like, give the videos a like. It helps other people find us. And as always, remember, at Villa Park podcast, we all follow the Villa.
Up and